Mao Zedong, the communist leader, has now launched his offensive across the Yangtze, which has been acting as a sort of frontier between his armies and the nationalists during weeks of abortive parleys. Yes, the Chinese communists, driving southward again, are over the Great River in their hundreds of thousands, and reports indicate that there's little to stop their advance. Pre-war pictures taken on the Yangtze show British and American warships there protecting their interests and their nationals. For years, the river had been open to foreign shipping, and for ships of 5,000 or 6,000 tons, it is navigable even as far as Hankow. Meanwhile, however, the Chinese Reds have swept on towards Shanghai in their bid to dominate all China. And in Shanghai, mass evacuations are once again reported as the unhappy people flee before the communist forces.
The eyes of the whole world are focused on Hong Kong, ringed in on the mainland side by communist forces. In this British stronghold of the Far East, life goes on much as usual, but there's an undisguised air of tension. Preventing infiltration by communists is one of the biggest difficulties in its defense. Even at this moment, red newspapers are being sold openly, and each copy contains a flag which adherents to the cause hope to wave triumphantly at some future date. The Georgic arrives in Hong Kong. The largest ship to visit the island colony since the war, she's been lent by the Australian government on a switch from carrying emigrants. A pipe band welcomes her, for she brings more reinforcements, and Royal Marine commandos at that. The 2,250 officers and men are another guarantee that Hong Kong will be defended, if necessary, in strength. General Harding, CNC Far East Land Forces, inspected them. Next day, HMS Ocean anchored. Her job has been to ferry aircraft and stores to the Far East, and her cargo for Hong Kong on this occasion consisted of Spitfires for the RAF. The Spits were swung off the flight deck onto a pontoon to be landed direct on Kai Tak airfield. British reinforcements have been pouring in, and latest reports put the garrison at about 40,000. Air defense is in the hands of Spitfire squadrons taken out aboard carriers, and all three services stand ready to meet an attack which, when these pictures were taken, nobody knew whether to expect or not. And so they waited. The question whether communist aggression would strike at this British outpost was as yet unanswered. The Amethyst and her crew remain the chief object of interest in Hong Kong. She'll be sailing for home on September the 9th. Boy Horton, youngest member of the ship's crew, with Simon the Cat, who was awarded the Animals VC for heroic conduct under fire on the Yangtze. Simon has a large fan mail. I'm afraid he may not be able to reply to them all personally.
Summer of 1949, HMS Amethyst was involved in an incident on the Yangtze River when she was engaged by the People's Liberation Army of Communist China during the Chinese Civil War. The shot is armour-piercing, which would have been fired by a Chinese-operated Type 94 anti-tank gun. The gun itself would have been Japanese and captured by the Chinese Communists during the Second World War and used afterwards. On April the 20th, HMS Amethyst, a modified Black Swan class frigate, was sailing up the Yangtze River to replace HMS Consort as the Nanking guard ship. The Nanking embassy was being protected by the guard ship during the Chinese Civil War. As she proceeded up the river, she was fired upon by gun batteries operated by the People's Liberation Army of Communist China. She was struck on the bridge, mortally wounding the commanding officer, and also the wheelhouse where the coxswain was injured. The ship, unable to steer, ran aground. Further shots took her guns out of action, and she was essentially helpless, moored on a bank in the middle of the Yangtze River under fire from the Communist Chinese. On the 22nd, the British naval attaché in Nanking, a man called Commander Kerens, came to the ship and assumed command. He began negotiations with the People's Liberation Army to allow the ship to proceed out of the incident area, but he was thwarted on many occasions by the Chinese insisting that the British had acted illegally and that they had fired first. Several attempts to rescue the ship had failed. HMS London and HMS Black Swan both came under fire and had to retreat. The situation was being monitored very closely by the Commander-in-Chief of the Far East Station, Sir Patrick Brind, who was stationed on his flagship HMS Belfast in Hong Kong, and he gave instructions to Keren to get underway at all costs. On the 30th of July 1949, 100 days after the ship had been placed at anchor on the Yangtze River, she slipped her cable and floated down in the middle of the night under darkness and masked by a Chinese passenger ship. There she proceeded downriver and rejoined the fleet. Amethyst later returned to Hong Kong, where the crew were allowed to leave and replacements were placed from other ships at the Far East Station, and she sailed home. The 37mm shot was retrieved from Amethyst and presented to the museum a few years later.
Good luck to the Lesters. Now, the ship, which you'll notice carries the markings F116 on her side, is within range of the first salutes of welcome. You remember HMS Cossack, the Navy is here, destroyer of the Altmark incident. Cossack, who has been escorting Amethyst, hauls out of line to starboard and joins in a claim of the Navy's newest champion. Ashore, the welcome has already started. Strings of Chinese firecrackers are set off from every building along the waterfront of Victoria Island. Then Jamaica, who had also been escorting Amethyst, takes up the cheering. Now Belfast, the flagship of the Far East Station, is within cheering range. It brings a lump to the throat watching the welcome of this small sloop by her sister ships on this distant station. All of them demonstrating their pride in the new lustre shed on their old service. All of them conscious of the tremendous hazards run by Amethyst in her dash for safety. Lieutenant Commander Kerens modestly estimated the chances of success as 50-50, but that was after the achievement. Other observers, knowing the vulnerability of ships in narrow waters and the difficulties of Yangtze navigation, put the odds against him as very much higher. But it's the Navy's way to be modest. Crowds line the quay at the dockyard, where famous ships of the Royal Navy have berthed throughout the years. Though the rain persists, the crowd is equally persevering. His Excellency the Governor is at the head of the distinguished party who watched Lieutenant Commander Kerens bring his ship alongside the north arm of the harbour. The Governor, Sir Alexander Grantham, is followed aboard by the Naval Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Sir Patrick Brind, by Vice Admiral Madden, and the Army's GOC, Lieutenant General Festi. The words of welcome are mingled with words of admiration. And what a young crew it was, which had borne with such seasoned fortitude the hardship and perils of those 102 days on the Yangtze. Men of the Amethyst, who have dared adversity and kept your tattered ensign flying, here in Britain, we are impatient to greet every man jack of you.
Hong Kong, an easy British outpost in war-torn China, receives its biggest boost to morale, the arrival just at the right moment of unexpected reinforcements, the gallant sloop Amethyst. She rejoins the British Far East Station, scarred and temporarily patched up after her dash down the Yangtze. Quick to enjoy their first taste of shore leave for 3 months are the men who only a few hours before were virtual prisoners of the Chinese communists. Hong Kong has done what every British town wants to do, feted the Amethyst heroes. In civvies for a brief spell is Lieutenant Commander Kerens, skipper of the sloop, who was awarded an immediate DSO. Now the Amethyst's navigator, Lieutenant Berger, and from Portsmouth Engineering Officer Williamson. not forgetting the wounded veteran, ship's cat Simon. To their families in the West Country, where many of the 73 officers and men were recruited, the Yangtze heroes send their best of greetings, the Amethyst smile.
Steaming into Gibraltar, a British bastion steeped in history, is a ship whose exploits will still be recalled 100 years hence. It's Amethyst. Cheering crowds line the quayside to give a hero's welcome to the gallant frigate, now on its last lap home. Hailed by naval sirens, saluted by the RAF, played in by an army band, Amethyst gets the reception rightly hers. Lieutenant Commander Kerens is at his post on the captain's bridge as the frigate ties up at berth 41. Her battle scars well concealed. It's a newly painted, trim and ship-shape Amethyst that receives Gibraltar's first official calling party, headed by the flag officer, Vice Admiral Brooking. Highlight of a 3-day-long reception is a parade by the crew through Gibraltar streets. Even today, the full story of Amethyst's epic action has not yet been told. But what has been said is enough to make Britons feel proud that these men are their fellow countrymen.
The story of the homecoming starts with a few scenes on board Amethyst during her voyage from Gibraltar to Plymouth. Damage by Chinese communist gunfire is discussed, while other members of the crew relax over a game of cards. With the captain is Simon the Cat, which won glory ignoring the communists ashore and killing rats on board. As Amethyst neared Plymouth, the paying off pennant was hoisted. Then the white ensign worn by the ship during the Yangtze incident. What a heartfelt welcome was in store for Amethyst as she reached the end of her voyage home. Wounded members of her company who'd been flown home earlier were among the very big crowd watching the frigate come in. When the ship had made fast alongside, the First Lord, the First Sea Lord, the Lord Lieutenant of Devon, the Lord Mayor and the C&C Plymouth went aboard. Viscount Hall, the First Lord, addressed the ship's company.
Each of you would give the same service in any other ship, and the rest of the Royal Navy would have behaved as you did in like circumstances.
And then for the crew there followed the moment all had been so eagerly looking forward to, the reunion with wives and sweethearts, parents and relatives. Jack French, the telegraphist who won the DSM, greets his mother and father. Leading seaman Crichton with his wife and her mother. 18-year-old ordinary seaman Bailey with his mother and father. Petty Officer Heath happily reunited with his family. Yes, it certainly was a time for taking pictures, and one of them, I need hardly add, was of the Amethyst captain, Lieutenant Commander Kerens, and his wife. Undoubtedly a wonderful moment this for all concerned. The next scene was the ceremonial march to the devastated city centre.